Well, I never would have guessed that an early 2000s NASCAR drivetrain would just fit in a Miata with only modifying the frame rails. You know, we cut apart our frame rails and re-welded in thicker 1/8" plate and pocketed it, and we made some clearance up here, but otherwise, it's a Miata with a Dodge R5P7 Nascar motor and a 4-speed dogbox race transmission, just like you would have found in a NASCAR in the early 2000s. And as it sits right now, we could mount it up, mount the front plate, mount the mid plate, and we're off to the races. However, that's not what this is about. We don't want to just make it somewhat fit in there and carry on our way. We want to keep everything as tight to the center as possible, because the more weight we can keep inside the wheels, inside the axles, the more competitive the car is going to be, the more of a weapon it will be in competition. And people always thought this car was crazy the way it was before, so we might as well make it actually crazy, you know? So that being said, we've got to cut apart the firewall and the transmission tunnel and rebuild them both. However, I made a deal with myself that we wouldn't keep opening cans of worms in terms of cutting until we finish the previous one. It's easy to get cut fever when you're cutting apart a car and just cut until you got nothing left to start with. And it happens fast. It's a thing, it's a real dilemma. So we've already used our cut token. So we need to rebuild, and then we'll get another cut token to cut the next section. That's how we're doing this. This car's got a lot of sentimental history for me because I've owned it longer than I've owned any other car in my entire life, by far. It's done a lot. It's been a lot of places. It's won competitions. It's, you know, I've had a lot of first new experiences in it. This car means a lot to me. It's gone through a lot of stages, from being just a basic Miata with a 1.8 turbo to a 5.3 making 350, to a 6.2 making 500 wheel. To throwing a 100 shot on top of that. It's seen a lot. Oh, it's definitely earned the right to be built to the absolute best of our abilities. And in reality, I don't want to build anything that I'm not trying to build better than anything I built before, because otherwise, what's the fun? What's the point, right? Yeah. Anyway, all that means, before we start hacking up more of the car, we got to rebuild what we've already cut off, which is the front end here. Now, this is going to be two separate structures. For this first structure, we're going to take that building better than we had before to heart, and we're going to use some CAD to design and build ourselves a front structure. Now, normally, in the past when I would say that, I was talking about this kind of CAD. Cardboard dated design, making a template, getting it to fit, transferring it to metal, and you're on your way. However, this time I'm talking about real CAD. We're gonna design this up on a computer, of all things, in Fusion. Cut it, weld it, print it, ship it, and bolt it on, hopefully, if we do our job right. And it should be pretty neat and intricate if we do our job right. So anyway, that's enough talking. It's time to get to work. Let's see what we can come up with and get to making it. So I started playing around with some design ideas, and it's part of this is functional, where we have to have clearance if we want more angle and for things that need to fit up here and all of that. And the other part is really just kind of, what do you think looks best? So I played around with doing it kind of curvy versus blocky, and for building it, it made the most sense to make it blocky. Also aesthetically, I don't know if the curvy is going to look right. So we're going to try this kind of extreme clearance model first, where we're building in a ton of room up there on the inside of this structure. It's a little risky. It might be too much, but we won't really know until we see what it looks like on the car. I'm gonna try it again. I got an idea. Oh yeah, that's better. This is where I'll probably have to put the dry sump tank. Yeah, it should definitely fit. Yeah, definitely V2.
V2 looks clean.
And also, I made it a little smaller up here. Keep it wider. Yeah, that'll work. All right, well, we got a design we're happy with. Got our new boomerangs to look. We put this one. You know, they're designed within the box. Decided to try to keep with these dimensions. This is where the factory bumper support would bolt on. I would have liked a little more, but since we're trying to fit the dry sump tank up front as well, Before with the LS, we had it in the back, and it just kind of made it a nuisance in every way. More weight, more lines, hassle to service. So we want to put it in the front, but it needs to be protected, so it's got to fit within this footprint. It's the same as what we cut off, basically. You can see how much, I mean, even this is still well within the confines of what was there, but this one's the way to go. The other nice thing about this design, doing it in pieces, is it's 4 of the same piece. That way it's easily replicatable, if we so happen to tear it up, which I'm hoping we won't. I'm not one of those drivers that goes out there and just stuffs it into the wall every round. I mean, it could happen, knock on wood. Does NDF count as wood? But that's not my standard approach, let's say. So ideally we won't have to rebuild it, but if we do, we got the files. We got some work ahead of us, but we've got the design. Now it's time to make the rest of the puzzle pieces. Fortunately, we basically just have to cut 3 of the same pieces. We don't even have to mirror them or flip them, because we can just flip them after the fact. It's just a sheet of steel. So that is one of the beautiful things about this design, especially because we do have a pretty limited cut space to work with. We could have cut a little bit larger pieces, but we're gonna kind of end up in the same boat. It would be great if we had like a 4x4 cutting area and we could cut, you know, basically 3 pieces as 1 piece. But, you know, I mean, I'm just glad to have CNC cutting capabilities, because trying to make 4 of these matching by hand, whew, don't sign me up for that, because I don't want to do it. I mean, obviously we wouldn't even be taking this approach if we didn't have this, but pretty sweet. I gotta say, that is pretty dang satisfying to have a matching stack of pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4. Whew. They definitely need some speed holes, because that's some weight. Feel that. Yeah. That ain't light.
No. But it is replacing all that.
It is replacing all that. That is true. Speed holes are always a necessity if you have a large piece of steel. One, obviously, for the weight side of things. And, you know, that is the most important, and that is the main reason. But also, they look cool. They make it look way nicer, you know? So in this case, we're going to try something a little different with the speed holes to try to maintain as much rigidity as possible while also shedding the weight of the holes. If we built this without any holes, it is not going to be very lightweight. It's not going to be any lighter than the simpler way that we could have built it. So that being said, as much as holes are great and they got a lot of positive benefits, it is very time consuming to drill this many holes through 1/8-inch thick steel plate. Now, in an ideal world, we would have used the features of the plasma cutter and cut these holes in, but we weren't really sure how we wanted to lay them out. And that's always a tricky thing with stuff like this when you're doing a bunch of holes, is the layout. How much space do you want? How large do you want the holes to be? All of that. And since we weren't committed, we committed ourselves to doing the manual labor of drilling a bunch of holes. But as those was finishing up the holes, it was my turn to start dimple dyeing these pieces. I've always wanted to get some dimple dyes, you know, because it's a great way to lighten up a piece and either retain or even sometimes add rigidity. Now, that being said, since all our holes are on the side, it's getting a little warpy, a little bit unnerving, but I got faith. We'll figure it out. Weird feeling. All right, well, before we dimple dye the rest of them, here's just a look at basically uncleaned holes, cleaned holes, dimple dye. Pretty stoked on that, man. I just assumed that A, the dimple dyes would be ridiculously expensive, but B, my press wouldn't be able to do it on anything like this. I mean, this is 1/8-inch thick steel. I punched it no problem. We did get a little warping as we did it, but that's just because the holes are offset because they have to be. But yeah, really happy with how this is turning out. Also, the dimple dyes were a lot cheaper than I thought. I always thought it'd be like $1,000 for a set. There's a couple $300 sets, but I didn't want to get that many. I didn't think I needed that many. So we have the 3/4 one, which is what we're using. We got a 1/2-inch one and a 1-inch one. These were one set. I think it was 70 or 80 bucks. And then this set was, I think, like 110 bucks, and it's 1.5 inch, 1 3/4, and 2-inch. So pretty good variety of sizes. Pretty stoked on that. Less than 200 bucks. We got a 6 set of dimple dyes that work great. And we're dimple dyeing. Dude, couldn't be happier. Upgrading capabilities left and right over here. Hold on, you got some. Anyway, moving on. I need to finish this. Finish designing so we can cut the middle section and then put it all together. Well, and we got to drill and dimple dye, and we got stuff to do. We're going to get this thing finished up. Keep plugging away. Also, side note, something I've been working on, tinkering with in my spare time here, is I finally ordered some new TIG welding stuff. Pretty stoked on that, man. I gotta say, it's satisfying, so I'm gonna get back to work. Being as we are knees deep into very intensive and specifically fabrication intensive projects, it kind of made me realize that I'm lacking in the TIG welding and TIG accessories department. I mean, we got kind of just enough, but I decided to expand the tool chest, the toolkit, and give us the capability for pretty much anything we need to do, from massive 19 cups for stainless and titanium, new micro torch setup for getting into tight places, small 4s for thin aluminum, thick aluminum, a little bit of everything. We have absolutely everything we could ever need now. It's all on me. It's just about me and my skill set. The tools, we got the tools, and I just, I had to take a moment and get them nicely organized. It's just really satisfying. It just scratches an itch, organizing stuff like this, but also when we need it, it's all there. It's all organized. We know exactly what we have. And as we use it, we can replace it. Stuff like the consumables. So now that that's done and organized, itch scratched, and I can sleep at night, it's time to get these pieces cleaned up before we dimple dye the rest of them. The one we did dimple dye, it was a little bit of a rush test. We wanted to see how it all worked. So it needed a little further cleanup. But the other ones, I was super excited to clean up the holes with this chamfer tool. I've always used the wrong tool, countersinks, but just because that's what I had. And this worked so much better than them. Up until it chipped. Of course, it just got this thing. I was singing it high praises to the moon, screaming it from the rooftops. And then the dang thing goes and chips on me like 3 pieces in. So it was good enough to manage to get it done, and we can move on to designing the centerpiece. Because one thing we were lacking was a logo. Josue managed to figure out how to get our Garage Built Co. logo into a DXF that I could use in Fusion to put on the design for this front structure. So we could ideally cut the logo out with the structure, which would be really cool. It's something, we want to do. We got to use the features while we're here, right? However, I luckily decided to do a test piece first. I was about to just cut it with the logo, but test piece, and the size and everything, it cuts out just a full shadow. So I thought, all right, let me see if I can tinker with this logo and get it to the point where it will hold on. Basically what I'm going for is each letter to be outlined, on both sides, not just one line, but for there to be enough structure there for it to hold it in place. And that sounds pretty simple, but as I got into redesigning this, it's tricky. There's a lot of nuance to it, and when you're looking at it on a computer screen, you think you've got a lot of gap between the lines, but then you go to cut it out and realize that gap is not as large as you thought. And we're limited to what the plasma cutter width is, right? It's going to cut a certain width. So if it's cutting 2 millimeters wide, and then you have lines that are 1 millimeter apart, or even 2, it's just going to cut the whole thing out. So I went back to the drawing board after not making a huge amount of progress. I mean, it was something, it was kind of hanging in there, but still not what I was going for. And tried to really just take it to the extreme and build as much gap between the letters as possible and see if I could get something usable, I feel like I'm on the cusp. I'm close to getting something that will cut out and be what I'm going for in my head. And every time I change it, it gets further and further from the original logo. And I mean, we're making progress, I guess you could say, but it's barely keeping the inside. And at this point, it's not much different than the outline, except it's not even close to being the original logo anymore. So I'm still leaning towards just leaving it the original way. But at this point, I've already invested so much time. I really want to see this through. I want to get it done and accomplish what I've been cutting out a gajillion pieces trying to accomplish. So we're getting closer and closer to keeping the inside. I mean, that's really what all this is about. All these changes are just to keep the inside of the letters intact. And it would work on the larger scale. If I did it 1.5, 2 times, it would work. But small scale wasn't happening. So I decided to start from scratch, take a simpler approach. And, of course, as usual, simple generally works. That's pretty cool. Barely hanging on there. Wow. So at this point, I basically decided to just kind of give up on the whole idea of keeping the letters in the middle for the small size. With how wide the plasma cutter cuts, it just didn't seem like it was going to be feasible. But I went ahead and decided to change the tip before we made this big cut on something we were going to use. And I didn't realize how blown out the tip was. Now, the only problem is changing the tip opened up another can of worms. There was a piece that got stuck to the other tip that I didn't notice. So then it was not firing. I kept having to rerun the program, but I finally got it working, and we hit the next stop on the struggle bus. In my troubleshooting of the tip problem and another height setting problem with the torch, I made the clearance height too low, and that's what caused that. All right, well, I spent entirely too much time trying to get this logo done in a way where it would cut well at this scale. But I think we're gonna try this, where I cut off a bunch of the tops and the bottoms to give it attachment. The only downside to doing it this way is the plasma has to start and stop a bunch, but I think that we have. I think there's a chance. So you're telling me there's a chance? No. So yeah, the reason I decided to give that another chance is because is it not over here? Oh, here it is. My tip was absolutely smoked. You can see the hole size for the tip that was on there when we were doing all these test cuts, and that's how small the hole is supposed to be. There's the possibility we could get this. But on this scale, you can see how far away that this is the OG design. Just put it on there, cut it. And then this is change all the way down to like these, where it wasn't even remotely the same shape anymore. Basically making our cut 3-4 times wider than it's supposed to be. So anyway, yeah, spent a lot of time on that. More time than I'd like to admit. But something I've learned and something I try to do with stuff like that, welding, if you weld something up and you have an issue, you gotta toss it, you gotta start over. It's good seat time. Obviously there's different scenarios, but for me, spending hours playing with this logo and test cutting, it definitely got me really in the groove with the software. So it's like, it feels like a waste of time, but you can't look at it like that, because anytime you learn is not a waste of time. That's what I say. So anyway, we were definitely on a struggle bus, just small teething issues. You can see how clean that cut is on the logo. So I'm thinking we might actually be able to get this logo cut, but on the small scale, which would be great. That's what we spent all yesterday fighting for, basically. So, silver lining of it crashing itself is that we get another chance. To see if we can maybe get it even nicer. So I'm gonna get set up and we're gonna kick tires, light the fires, cut this thing out and see what we're torquing with, because we've still got a lot of other stuff to do to build this. And again, I've spent quite a bit of time on this, but it'll be worth it. Gotta use the features. Let's get back to work. As much as it was time that we didn't have spent on redesigning the logo and then messing with the teething issues of calibrating the machine and realizing, what kind of makes it tick and what can cause problems, at least at this point, we've got this thing dialed. Between the design of the logo and the way the machine cuts, I mean, it's in primo shape. So we got our best chance at success here. Well, that was a success for the most part. It bent this little tab when it fell down. But logo-wise, oh yeah, and the letters are tight. We finally nailed it between the tighter tip, but then also I played around. I changed even still some of it, like where I ended them and stuff. So, I'd end one up here and then down here opposing and then up here. I mean, this thing's light, dude. I mean, that's the goal. But I don't weigh much. Basically, we just need to cut another one, really. All right, well, success. These pieces could have taken an hour top to bottom, maybe 2. They took a day and a half, nearly 2 days, just between mainly trying to get the logo, but at least it wasn't all for nothing. We got the logo. This is what I was kind of going for from the start, and what all these were about. So we'll get quicker and quicker. So anyway, very, very happy to have these done. That was a big thing, done and dusted, and they're really light, and yeah, just gotta scrape the slag off, grind them, you know, the usual, but it's cool. I'm stoked on the octagons. Whew. Okay, I think that's it. I am gonna get back to work. Oh, too much time gadding, but it'll work out in the long run. It will. One of the downsides to plasma cutting is the slag, and we've got the machine settings pretty dialed for minimal slag, but on the logos themselves, since it has to start and stop so much, every time it starts, it's got to, you know, blast that initial hole. You get kind of extra slag. And I've learned that slag, you're better off trying to chip as much of it off as you can, because it does not like to grind off. So I got to work on getting those pieces cleaned up, and then back to dimple dyeing. Finally, I meant to finish this before getting into all that logo design rabbit hole, but I was too eager to see if it would work, see if we could make it work, because implementing the logo in this was really wanted to do that. Luckily, between the press and these dimple dies, even with this being 1/8" steel, they blast right through it, no problems at all. So once we can finish dimple dyeing these, get everything cleaned up, we're pretty well ready as far as these pieces are concerned. There is one more major piece we've got to work on, and that is something I wanted to get to work on designing. And the logo, as much as it was a rabbit hole of time, it did kind of inspire me to try to go back to doing something I wanted to do. I want to implement this Dodge logo in this next design, because it would just be really cool to have an homage to the engine that we're using. And I think I've got a plan on how to do that now. All right, well, here's all of our pieces so far, dimpled and cleaned up. Finally coming together. We need 2 more things to complete this, along with obviously building it. One, we'll probably just use some some cardboard CAD for these. Make some templates, but also we needed a design, just done exporting. We're gonna have one piece that is like the I-beam in between. We're able to, I made the Dodge logo, basically each section. So this is like a side, that's a corner, front, larger holes with dimple dies down the side. So you cut the flat bar. Bada bing, bada boom.
Boom, easy peasy.
Easy peasy, no problem. It's only taken us, I don't want to talk about it. It's been pretty fun, honestly. So these last 2 puzzle pieces, one is relatively simple. The front plates, that's not too concerning. However, the other piece is pretty complicated. It's one piece that has to be exact in multiple bends and logos and holes and dimples. I mean, literally the kitchen sink, basically. But also, it's one piece that has to attach all 6 pieces to it. So it's got to be pretty perfect. There's not much margin for error. But fortunately, this is the benefit to doing all of it in CAD, is basically, instead of having to go physically measure this, just went back in CAD and determined the angles and the lengths for this piece. Easy peasy.
You gonna run it dry?
No, I already did.
Oh, true.
This last piece is definitely pretty risky, because we're not cutting both the shape and the inside out on the plasma cutter. We're just cutting the inside. So that means we've got to get basically the cuts to land perfectly on the center of this piece of flat bar, because it's already the size that we need it to be. So any mistake here and we could end up with holes cut, halfway off the edge or something. So it's definitely a little bit tricky, because it's got to be on there just right. Not to mention, the piece is so wide that it's way outside of what the plasma cutter's cutting area is. So we had to break it down into 3 sections, basically a left, middle, and a right. And, you know, every time we move it, we've got to get it back just in the right spot. So it's a little nerve-wracking, but so far so good. We're on to the last one, the last side. So if we can get through this unscathed, well, we should have a functional piece. And it's looking good. Look at that, dude. That's wild. Look at that. One big old piece. That's so cool. That's so dang cool, dude.
It's like your belt. Put it on.
I'm wearing this for what? It's cool that that process worked. I think the GB Coat logo is the best one yet, as far as the shape to allow it to stay together, but also cut as much out as possible. Got our holes. Looking good. We were not off to a great start with dimple dyeing this thing. It's just, with dimple dyes, you've got to basically push down and it'll bow, and then it kind of flattens it back out. Not perfectly, but it flattens it back out. And the machine, the press, just didn't have enough for this large of a dimple dye on this thick of material. And it was, you know, one of those moments. So we tried using the smaller dimple dyes on the larger holes, which just doesn't really work, but eventually came up with a method where you use the bottom and squish it back flat, and it was working. But then we also realized that the air pressure was turned way down, and basically the press was way weaker than it actually was. So that doesn't help. It's not quite going all the way. Oh no, hell no. That's exploding your face territory for sure. I was thinking it was just going to be like an easy pump, you know, like just a little choo-choo. Alright, check it out. We definitely chicken footed it on the first one. We still got a little bit of working on it, but we almost pulled the chute. It seemed like it wasn't gonna cut it. Turned it back up. Power came back. Got it pretty solid. She is looking pretty snazzy. There, the combination of things. I don't know. Real fun, real satisfying. Loving it. How do you feel about the features? New features.
We're using them. We're still learning.
We're definitely using them.
We're using them, and it's very satisfying. Look at that.
Would you just look at it? So yeah, now we've just got to bend them. Or yeah, well, I mean, obviously we've been bending them, but bend them on purpose, you know. While we have the dimensions and the angles off CAD for doing the bends on the piece of flat bar, I can't, it's not that I don't trust it, you know, I more so don't trust my own drawing. So I want to have something to check it against, which is the pieces that it's going to attach to. Also, there's the real world of tacking and welding stuff together. You've got to get it all square. It can grow a little, it can shrink a little, angles can change a little. So we got both of them tacked up, so that way we have our reference point and we can check our bends as we go.
Oh, solid with the dog down.
Yeah, I do, for sure. Before we commit, moment of truth. Now we got top and bottom tacked. Little, I wish I could whistle. If imagine a whistle noise. Little whistle, whistle, whistle.
See.
I need a little more. It needs a little more.
A little more bend.
Tiny bit. That's roughly it there, guys. What a unit. Wow, that's crazy. We got, oh, look at that. The Dodge logo, the dimple dies, and then more dimples. Gosh, woo.
Look, this old fish, show him.
That's wild, dude. That is absolutely wild. Seeing the pieces cut is one thing, but seeing it all come together like I had envisioned in my head is, wow, what a feeling. I said for so long that I didn't like designing on computers, and you know, it wasn't my thing. I just like, oh, I like doing it hands-on and drawing it out and marker old school and feeling it out, and that was just me believing that because I wasn't good at it. The satisfaction is the same. My whole argument before was that it wasn't as satisfying when you just draw it up on a computer and like hit print and there it is. You know, but it is satisfying. I'm liking the octagons.
You did it. No, it looked. I think it came out great.
Yeah,
Man.
Oh man, all right. Well, we're gonna pick this back up in the morning, get back to it, finish welding, blah blah blah. We might cut the brackets real quick while we're here, while we got the doors open and all that jazz. I don't know if you can tell by my excitement, but this has been a really enjoyable process. Learning, you know, the arc droid, the CNC side of it, the CAD stuff between this and 3D printing, and it's been extra cool because Josue got his own 3D printer recently, so we've both been learning at the same time together, and it's just made it so much more fun. And I wanted him to run the whole ArcDroid program on cutting these brackets, these plates for the front of the frame rails, because doing the process top to bottom is just so satisfying. Taking a piece of cardboard and then turning it into steel, it's cool. Good job.
I did it.
The first successful plasma CNC cut piece. The bolts are here. No, you do it. Satisfaction. Well, we've officially got every single last puzzle piece, and now it's just a matter of gluing them together. So I got to glue the weld, obviously, the top 3 and the bottom 3 together. This is kind of what I don't love that we have to do this, but it is kind of the reality of not being able to cut this all at one piece. We'd need a really large cutter or table for that to happen, but we're working with what we got, and it's still way better than what we had, so I'm loving it, you know? And while I was getting those prepped and ready, Josue worked on cleaning up the plates. You know, we need good shiny metal to weld to, and that is one of the downsides to working with steel, man. There's a lot of mill scale, and it's, you know, to try to clean all the mill scale off is not an easy task. And if it's rough mill scale, you'll see it through the paint. So at least on the very top, we wanted to clean all of it off to shiny bright metal so we could have, you know, a nice clean piece once this thing's all put together, puzzled up, and painted.
That's the bottom.
Getting this I-beam portion in here nice and center is really the most critical part. Well, there's a lot of critical parts, but, you know, this thing just as a bare flat bar that we hadn't touched, put holes in, done anything to, was wavy, you know? So obviously after we messed with it a lot and put holes in it and cut logos into it, got a lot more wavy. So as we tacked it in, we had to really work it back as square as we possibly could. I really wanted to TIG weld this starting out, but the problem is as we started grinding down this mill scale, I mean, to make TIG welding it make sense, we need to have shiny bright metal to weld to. And to grind all the mill scale off, all the weld joints on this thing, it was just going to take so much time. It would take a lot of time. And we've already taken a lot of time on a lot of things where we took a lot of time. So we needed to minimize the places where we were taking a lot of time. So we decided to MIG weld it. I honestly kind of enjoy the times where I get a chance to MIG weld because I don't do it very often. And it's very different from TIG welding. With TIG welding, you're doing a lot at once, but you can constantly adjust the settings, the pedal, the amperage, the amount of rod you're feeding. Whereas with MIG welding, you really got to get the settings themselves right because as you start welding, you can't really change them. So they're just different. It's fun. Change of pace, you know? And it's flat, baby. Let's go. Oh, yeah. Good flat. It's pretty satisfying to MIG. Just able to blast through it. Check it out. Seeing all the pieces set together is one thing, but seeing it as one piece, it's wild. I can't believe we made that. It's so crazy. Wow. My first time taking a step back and looking at it. Welds came out decent. Old Miggy welds. I'm most happy about the Dodge logo because it's so much more noticeable than I thought it would be because it's at the corner. And it was like kind of the perfect shape to fit the corner. Like it just worked out really well, the Dodge logos. It's like, you see it? Oh yeah, that's pretty light. It's definitely lighter than what was on there. Well, I may have lied a little bit ago when I said this is the last critical step because all of this thing's squareness, how square it is, how well it all fits up, it's all relevant if it doesn't fit up to the chassis correctly. So this joint here where we're tacking this to the plates, this is critical. This is, I mean, probably the most critical. I think we finally reached the last critical, though, I promise. So got it tacked up and level, checked it every which way. There's so many places where it can be off here. We've really got to make sure we get it right. But it's level. It's sitting there square. It's tacked on. So now it's just a matter of welding out the plates, hoping we don't get any warpage in the final 5-yard line, and then we can put this thing on and stamp it. Done and dusted. That's the goal, at least. tool it in.
Oh, time.
But at least be able to get a power tool in there.
Oh man, straight to it.
I may have sat on it earlier when it was just tacked out of curiosity, and it didn't budge. People always talk about welds like, oh, that weld's got a little this, a little that, and it's like,
Whoa, easy.
if 4 tacks can hold me, yeah, dude, it doesn't budge. That's a lot of weight.
I ain't going nowhere.
I ain't going nowhere. You gotta say it. No, it's stout, dude. That's That's actually a good
Nice
test.
job.
We're gonna test it. We gotta test it. See how much it flexes when we jack the car up.
Just the test.
If it stays super rigid, then we know it's really strong. Because I've never had a bash bar that I could do this to where it felt safe. Oh, dude. It's not flexing. That's crazy. It's literally lifting the car, no problem.
Nice.
Okay, I don't want to push our luck, but...
No. Get the gist.
You saw... Dude, that's why. Because even bash bars I've had flex, because that's a lot of leverage. You're lifting... Granted, the car's gutted, but you're lifting all that weight from way out here. So, you gotta stand on it. Just climb up on there. Climb up on there. How's it feel?
Feel solid.
Right?
My balance is like hey! Oh no, dude.
Nah, dude, it's stout. So here's the thing. There's several layers here. Layer 1, we don't want this to be way stronger than the frame rails. We want this to crumple before the frame rails do. So it's like we've kind of got 2 layers of protection. We'll have the bash bar up here, which same concept, needs to be weaker than this, but as strong as it can be. You know, I don't want it to just bend if I bump somebody. I want it to be stout, but it needs to bend first. And if it hits hard enough to go through it and start bending this, and then lastly, the frame rails. You know, and that way, if we get to the point where we're bending the frame rails, tweaking the chassis, we've got larger problems. But like I said in the beginning of this, I'm not the type of driver to go out and drive at 110%, crash, and then dial it back. I start at 60. But also the weight. We need to keep the weight down. That is probably priority number 1 with this build. Keep the weight center, keep the weight down. Not to mention less weight, you have less inertia. So if we crash at 30 miles an hour and the car weighs 2,200 pounds, that's a lot less force going into this than if it weighs 2,700 pounds crashing at 30. So anyway, yeah, really, really pleased with that. Gosh, it came out nice. We got front end back on. She's no front Sally right now anymore. Got a front, so now we can cut the next section out, get the engine where we need it so we can mount the engine up. But first, we're gonna push this thing outside. It just hits different. The project like this always hits different when the car's outside. All right, check it out in the sunlight. Whew. What a bad unit. Look at all that space, all the room for activity. The smell of MIG welding and plasma cutting is burned into my nostrils, but it was worth it. It was worth it. Wow, she's got a front end back on her now. On and popping, baby. On and popping. Ooh, that's a nice sight. Before we put the press back, I feel like it's it's earned a bit of an upgrade after all the work it put in on this project. So we wanted to make it mobile because having to move it around with the hand truck is not ideal. And we have an air over hydraulic ram on it, so we don't really need it to be super stable. But with parking casters, we can kind of have both. They basically got a stop that you crank up, and then it's sitting on rubber stops. Crank it down, it's sitting on wheels. So unfortunately, the ones that I had lying around that I didn't use for another project were the 4-bolt style, and they wouldn't fit. So, we got to use the features. We knocked out some brackets with the arc joint, cut them up, got them cleaned up, got them welded on, and now we can bolt our parking casters on and move this thing around without the hand truck, because I think during these projects it's going to need to come out and go back in a few more times. You also want to plasma cut a bracket for this at some point, for the foot pedal. But now this thing Oh no.
I ain't going nowhere.
I can still scoot it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's
No different than what I like. It scoot itself too before.
yeah, 100%. But yeah, now it's solid and mobile. Real quick, a little before and after. This is what we had here. Let me show you up close because you realize how tight the space was. All this here, and you can see how much more room we've got at the frame rails. And then the core support alone, the way this core support goes back, trying to get the engine in here, this is kind of the pocket you have. So like with the transmission, I mean, you really gotta dive that thing down. So we went from all that to that. So much better. I mean, obviously we're gonna have a couple small little stick brackets coming off to support things, but just interesting to see. Oh yeah.
Getting a look at it as well ourselves.
See how easy it is to take this. So, gosh, this is heavy. We'll have to weigh them both. Before we can start cutting, we kind of need to know what exactly we need to cut. There's not a ton for the transmission, but there's this one box as well as the shifter that are kind of in the way. It's mainly the firewall, the tunnel, and some other things that are going to have to make way for this big old 830 horsepower, 9,000 RPM NASCAR engine to fit nicely in this Miata. It's a nice sight seeing the engine and the dog box together. Whew, all right, well, weird, we'd been rebuilding, gotta get back into cut mode. Not used to cut mode. Look at that. Oh, hold on. Nice. Wow. That's crazy. Wow. Whoops. How did that happen? Hello in there. Nice to see you again. Can you go a little faster, please? Call me T-Gravity. This is why we wanted to rebuild before we cut some more, because it is getting a little crazy. Yeah, I meant to say, I should have explained what I meant. I meant to go past the line. These transmissions are pretty easy to clear at the top, with the exception of this box. There's this one box, it's like a 4x4 square, and it's kind of always in the way. It's about an inch behind this, and it was in front of it. This was as deep as this. We can go back another 2 inches. Drop it down more. This is with no rails either. Oh, yeah. We can get it this far back. Yeah, honestly, that's like, it's definitely manageable there. All right, well, we've got a lot to go off of now. A lot to do, some homework on, even mocking up the pedal box. The big question here is we've already got the engine back an inch and a half from where it's been this whole time, because you can see the mid plate was fully in front of the firewall. Now we're behind it, I measured, it's an inch and a half. So we're already way better off. I mean, we're already further back than we ever were with the LS. Probably a good 2 to 3 inches further back than the LS was. If you look, I mean, our front cylinder isn't even past the strut tower, which is really, really, really solid. That said, the only thing really stopping us from going further back, as far as what's in the way right now, is this area here. Now, we could cut this out and basically offset it as far back as the center is here. So then it would just be that far back across and then up, and pocket the whole thing and go back another, probably an inch, maybe an inch and a half. However, where the engine is now is kind of right at the limit of a few things. Where the shifter is, which isn't a huge deal, but again, if we can maintain this shifter setback that we have now, then we can have one spare for both cars, which would be great. And with all this stuff being safety wired, swapping the shifter is a bigger deal than you would think. So it's good, bad, it's not a huge deal. The biggest thing is where the mid plate mounts there. We've got to build a structure to that from the frame rail. It's got to be strong. That's where half of the engine is, half of the engine's mounting. So where it is right now, it can effectively be under my foot. My feet are far enough back with the seat all the way back to where this isn't going to bother me. But if we go back another inch, especially if we go back an inch and a half, 2 inches, it's going to be so far back that my feet have to go next to it, and then it starts to get kind of tight, which is going to make it uncomfortable, especially having the seat all the way over here to then have the pedals all the way over here. It's a can of worms, it's a rabbit hole. At the moment, I think this is a good spot. We've cut a lot to get it this far back. I don't think it needs to go a ton further, but I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. What do you think? Do you think it's worth it for another inch and a half, 2 inches? Again, it does change the game, but like we're here, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I'd say I'm leaning towards where it is now, because it's in a good spot. I mean, it was all right where we started, and now we are significantly further back than that. So anyway, yeah, we've got some homework to do. We got to kind of come up with a pedal box, decide how much more we want to cut, if any, how we want to rebuild it, what we want to do tunnel top wise, blah, blah, blah. We got some homework to do, which means this is where we got to part ways. It's time to end it here. This project was tedious and took a long time, but it was a learning experience, and it was a lot of fun. It just, man, the time flies by when you're having fun / learning. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of the structure. I'm really happy with how it came out. I can't wait to build everything else off of it. And I mean, you can see we've got a ton of room now that the engine's further back. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and any suggestions, input, ideas, questions, comments, concerns. We're here for it. So yeah, okay. I think that's going to be a wrap. Let's just chop it, cut it, end it, whatever the case. Let me know on the engine thing, though. Further back, I don't know. We're already in the green or red, black, whatever, positive. We're already better, way better than we were with Ellis. That's all I'm going to say before you leave and leave your opinion. Okay, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'm tired. It's been a long one. Goodbye. I will see you next time, though. Don't forget. I'll see you then. So, okay, goodbye. All right, it was Lay's first time wheeling the golf cart. Yep, don't chicken foot it.